You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bat Flip Podcast. This is episode number 41, coming to you on June 22nd here on Tuesday, and just a exciting week of baseball. Some big news this week, big call up tonight, and we're going to talk a little bit today about some, with the trade season approaching, some teams that are buyers, sellers, some teams that these next few weeks are going to determine a lot of things, but before all this, I want to bring in Damien, and how are you doing this week? I kind of know because I've seen you this week.
Yeah, it was a very fun week. Just got back from Nashville actually late last night. Went there for the NASCAR weekend, as you know. Kind of met up with you and a bunch of our other buddies, and we finally our first face-to-face meeting after
Yeah.
we started this podcast and stuff. So it's been a pretty good week. It was some awesome racing back there, but it's tough when you're back there for something like that. You're not paying too much attention to baseball, but like you said, a major call up this week, and trade season's approaching. So let's dive into what's been happening.
Yeah, and just a quick story. It was funny. We were out in Broadway in Nashville on Saturday night, and after the Xfinity race, and we were watching the Dodgers game, and I kept having to give Damien my phone so he could watch the Dodgers
Yeah,
game. I thought that was funny, but
because at the time Walker Buehler was throwing a no hitter, and then I didn't have
yeah,
any signal, so you kept having to give me the
yeah,
dang phone so I can try and keep
it's
up with
funny,
it.
but
But
there's not too many people who are like the two of us that are down in Broadway in Nashville worried about the baseball game, watching it on our phones while we're in
yeah,
the loud
standing
bar in there.
yeah, standing at a bar with country music and stuff all over the place, and we're sitting here watching a phone or watching a baseball game on a dang phone.
So,
But
uh,
anyways, well, the major call up we had, we hinted on it a little bit, but that's the number one overall prospect in baseball. Wander Franco got called up by the Tampa Bay Rays. He's a 20-year-old, signed back in 2017 for $3.825 million. At the time, was the top ranked international player, and he's just did nothing but exceed at every level. He's projected at 80 hit tool, which is the best you can get, on the 20/80 scale. Projected 60 power, 55 raw power, 60 speed, 55 fielding, basically the whole package all the way around. This guy he's on track to, if he lives up to this, to be one of the best players that we've seen.
yeah, this guy is, he's as good as it gets as a prospect. He's a switch hitter. He's got a great swing from both sides of the plate. He he's very, very, very disciplined. Has very quick hands, a lightning fast bat. Doesn't swing and miss. In his career, these are just some minor league numbers for you here. Um, in his career, he's got in AAA this year. His worst plate discipline of his career has been in AAA this year, where he has a 7% walk rate and a 12% strikeout rate. So if you have a 12% strikeout rate in your first 39 games of AAA, and you still have a 148 WRC plus and a 900 OPS, then and people are wondering why you aren't having better plate discipline, then that shows you how good he is. But in his in his career so far in high A 2019, only struck out 7% under 7% of the time, walked 12%. I mean, this guy, he's got the power. A lot of scouts think his power is going to play up just because he's going to hit the ball so much because of his plate discipline. Um, and then he's a guy who's possibly going to stick at shortstop. Even if he doesn't, he can easily play an elite third base or second base. There is a possibility that the Rays move him away from shortstop. I don't know which position he was playing tonight.
He's playing third.
He's playing third because
Yeah.
they do have Taylor Walls, who is another top 100 prospect that recently got called up, whose value is tied up in his glove. So it makes sense that he would be the shortstop as being the elite defensive player. Then Wander Franco, being a very good defensive player, would switch off to third or to second, but he could easily man those spots. Got a good arm and everything. But Fangraphs puts him at an 80 future value on the 20/80
Yeah.
scale, which I've never seen before. So I think this is a guy who is a likely perennial all-star and possible perennial MVP candidate. But where would you know, there's been a lot of hype about Wander Franco, and ever since he was signed out of the Caribbean, but even more hype recently. Where do you think his debut here ranks? You know, when you compare it to some of the big debuts in the past, you had the big debut of Jason Hayward, who hit a home run his first at bat. You had the big debuts of Ronald Acuna Jr., Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Some of these guys that came up as number one prospects, Steven Strasburg, back in, which of course is he a pitcher is a little different. Bryce Harper, some of these just super elite hyped debuts. What do you think of that? Where do you think he ranks?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell where you're going to be able to rank Franco because he hadn't played above A ball until this year, and he played those 39 games at AAA. We had a little bit more of a sample size with all the other guys,
Yeah.
but if you listen to what scouts say, and more oftentimes I trust what the scouts are saying more than what I can look up stats at AA or whatever. But some of these guys are saying that he's he's way better than Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And when the time Vlad was coming up, he was supposed to be the best player that people had saw in a long, long time. Um, and then one's saying that this guy basically he doesn't even seem like he's human for the success he has at the plate, on the field, just in general, and the type of guy he is. Like, to say that he is 20 years old, they're talking that he already acts like a veteran, a mature veteran. He's always one of the first guys there, last guys out. I know it's very cliche, but it's what everything you see about Franco is just rave reviews. And I mean, he hit a homer tonight in his debut. Spoiler alert. Sorry if you guys didn't know that, but I mean, he had three really good at bats. The first one, he was down 0-2, came back and walked. Um, the next one, I think he got down 0-2 again and battled back, hit a deep fly out to center field, and then he hit that massive home run. So just
And now
just by the
he just got another hit.
did he?
Yeah,
Well,
he's
there he
two
just
for
got
three
another hit.
now.
So it's going to be really fun to watch him grow, and I think it's awesome because we're going to be able to see his growth, for 20 years possibly. I mean, the guy's still so dang young, and like you said, I have never seen a Fangraphs future value of an 80.
Yeah, and the thing that's crazy to me about him too is that some of the things you think about him, you look at his numbers in the minors and what scouts have said and everything. You're thinking of maybe like a Vlad Jr. that can play defense. I mean, you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking maybe of Fernando Tatis Jr. that doesn't strike out. I mean, this is the kind of stuff.
Right.
This is the kind of prospect that you don't see come along very often, and um, we'll keep an eye on him. Obviously, his hype is going to just explode even more after tonight. His first exposure to the big leagues, going 2 for 3 with a homer and a walk. Um, at least. I mean, the game's still going on, so I guess you could end up seeing him do more. But it's one of those things where we'll see how he handles it. We had guys like some of those guys struggled a little bit when they came up. They might have had a couple big games at the beginning, and then they kind of fell off a little bit, started to figure things out later on. A guy like Vlad Jr. I don't think there's going to be too much patience with Wander Franco after the night he's had tonight. We'll see what happens. I think he's definitely a guy who, um, you know, he's exciting, and it's exciting to see him come up. And I think it'll be a fun player to watch on the Rays,
It,
who are already a pretty good team.
yeah, it really will be. And I think one of the major things that Franco has above, really any of the other guys we've seen is that plate discipline. He already at 20 years old already has such a good eye and understanding of the strike zone and stuff. I believe I was reading one of the things, an article on him that said he had swung 150 something times at pitches and didn't miss one time. Like in the minors. That's just it's uncalled for, especially for somebody so young.
Yeah.
So
So it really the only prospect that I can remember in the past 4 or 5 years that had that level of discipline is Vlad Jr. But if Vlad Jr. has his other issues, base running, defense,
right.
he could put up they could put up very similar offensive numbers throughout their careers, but you look at Wander Franco as a guy who's athletic, is going to steal some bases, and he's going to play really good defense on the infield it might not be at shortstop because of the Rays needs, and because of his abilities and everything at other positions. But if it's at second or at third, either way, or short, he's going to play a really good defense at a good at a tough defensive position, which is very, very important. So this is a huge deal. This is a potential future MVP type guy. Um, it's rare to see a talent like this come up, and we hope that he's number one, stays healthy
Yeah.
for his career, and number two, I think it'll be fun to watch this guy succeed. I think he's going to be a really fun player. So
Yeah, I know it's going out on a limb, but this could be a guy that we're talking about might be a future, Mike Trout type esque player
yeah,
if he can live up to the hype. And at the time, Mike Trout wasn't what we thought Mike Trout is now, but if we can kind of grasp that a little bit earlier, maybe find that in Wander
yeah.
Franco, and it appreciate it. It's what I'm trying to say, especially so young.
Yeah, yeah. So it's going to be fun to watch, and of course, this is a guy who's going to get opportunities to potentially play in the postseason and stuff early in his career too. So
Yep.
this is a guy who we've had that issue with Mike Trout. It's been hard to market Mike Trout because his team's been bad. But
Hmm.
this Wander Franco might be a guy who, on a pretty good team, you could end up seeing him some in the postseason here in the next year or two. So it'll be interesting to see. Don't want to go on too much about one player, as we have a lot of guys to talk about today. But it's very it's very exciting to see him come up, and I can't wait to see what he does.
Absolutely. Well, the next thing we wanted to hit on was, we've talked a lot about, teams have been struggling and teams who've been succeeding and that, but what we're really starting to come into is trade season's about a month away. The trade deadline is on July 31st. And you start seeing, especially the teams that are kind of borderline, sometimes they make moves early to try and go one way or the other. And wanted to kind of hit on who we thought the buyers are right now, who the sellers are, who are some teams that maybe to watch for in this next month and see if they succeed, or if they don't, that can really tip which way they go, and if they're going to buy or if they're going to sell some pieces off. Um, the first set of buyers that we really had were the two New York teams, the Yankees and the Mets. The Yankees could use some outfield help, a bat, really center field, really. The Mets, they could use rotation. Stroman left early today. Carrasco's been out all year. Syndergaard's, been held back a couple times from his rehab from Tommy John. DeGrom's been in and out even with different, a shoulder, a hip. I don't think he's had an elbow. There was a third one. I'm not sure what it was. But he's been battling a little bit, and they're still really good. But right now, the two New York teams are kind of our first two buyers.
Yeah. So when we talk about these buyers, I think just to clarify here, these buyers that we're looking at are teams that there's going to be other buyers. Obviously, like I think you look at like the White Sox are going to be a team that wants to add to their thing. The Dodgers are going to be their in first place. The Padres, but these are teams that I think have either glaring needs or teams that we kind of know what they need, because a lot of those other teams were kind of like, well, they could add something because they're really good, but it might be bullpen arms or something where kind of everyone wants to add bullpen arms. It's remotely in contention, but these teams, the Mets, like I think you hit it perfectly. Pitchers, all those guys being out, and I mean you're having to run out David Peterson, who's not very good. Jared Eichhoff pitched last night for them. Um,
Well, they
you
lost
know,
Luke Casey too.
Luke Casey's out, yeah. So I mean, they've got a lot of guys that are banged up, and then Gisselman went down the other day. Marcus Stroman left tonight's game with a hip issue um, that didn't look great. He kind of winced after a pitch, and he tried to give it a go, and he was wincing the whole time. Didn't look good. He might miss. I hope it doesn't appear to be some long term issue, but like you said, Jagrom's been in and out a little bit with some nagging little things, trying to keep him healthy. But they're a team that really could use some help. I mean, they could use help in the outfield as well. They're missing a couple guys, but I mean they've been starting Kevin Pillar, Billy McKinney, Albert Almora. That's their starting outfield tonight. So um, they definitely could add something there. Although they do have a couple guys like Michael Conforto coming back soon. Um, and then the Yankees, they just need the starting pitcher. Kluber's out now. I think that they've got a couple guys who are pitching well. One of the additions that could come in for the Yankees could actually be if Luis Severino is able to pitch, come back healthily. Um, is healthily a word? I don't know. But he, they could use that. But I think they could probably add a starting pitcher. And then the other teams, the Brewers. This is a team that's currently in first place or tied for first place, maybe. Are they? They are
they're
currently
tied.
tied with the Cubs. So this is a team that obviously is up there. They've got two of the better pitchers in the game, but their offense stinks. So they need to add some offense. And they kind of just need a any bat. I mean, you're probably not going to pull Yelich out of your lineup, but that's really the only guy that is untouchable in their lineup right now. And Yelich hadn't even been all that good. So I think you look at Houston, maybe add a starting pitcher to give some depth in that rotation. They're a team that I think could use the elite reliever. I don't know what kind of elite reliever might get traded, but they're a team that could maybe use that top reliever on the market type deal. And then the Cubs need starting pitching. They've had Davies has been bad. Arrieta's been bad. They've had a great outings from their bullpen. They've had really good um, offensive production as of late, and they need some starting pitching badly. So I think those are kind of our five buyers there.
Yeah, that you hit on the nail on every one of those. I wouldn't even be surprised if the Brewers tried to add another starter. Maybe not a top of the rotation guy, but maybe a guy like Kyle Gibson from the Rangers, who's
Yeah,
a kind of an under the radar type guy who can come in and be really solid. Maybe that third to fourth guy. I mean, Freddie Peralta has been really good, but you know, sometimes in these series you need four starters.
you do need
So
four. If the Brewers are going to make it past well, I mean, even in the division series, it's usually a good thing to have four, but because you don't want to pitch guys on 3 days rest too much.
yeah,
But I think you definitely look at the Brewer, and some of this is also going to depend on what kind of prospect capital or what kind of guys can these teams trade. I mean, if you look at the Cubs, they could honestly flip a couple of the guys they got in a couple of their offseason trades, like the Yu Darvish trade. Now that they look like they really are in contention this year, you look at Houston. Who do they have to trade? You can maybe look at if they go for that reliever. Forrest Whitley's sitting down there and he's had his injury concerns, but he's still a guy that a lot of people believe in his talent. So you might have a guy you could move there. The Brewers, it's hard to say. They might be a team that needs to package a lot. Um,
yeah.
you look at the Yankees have some good pieces. They could honestly add an elite guy if one is available somewhere. I mean, they have enough prospect capital for that. The Mets, they've got some good prospects. But they got a couple top prospects, and then they have a couple of that they could move, but it's going to be it might be hard to match up something without moving one of your top guys. So it's interesting to look
Absolutely.
at this though, and we'll see what happens with these buyers.
Yeah. So to mention, those are the buyers. Some of the sellers that we think, has some pieces that they could actually deal off. The Minnesota Twins, they're a team we thought was going to be, top of the division. I think we both picked them to win the division actually, but um, they're going to have some bullpen arms. Taylor Rogers is one who will be a hot commodity, a very good left-handed pitcher. Um, I don't think. I mean, they might be able to get something for Colome or Hansel Robles. I mean, those guys aren't going to be major deals. But Nelson Cruz is another one that you could see a team. It might be limited to the American League. Maybe
Definitely.
maybe that's a guy. I mean, not that it's a great option, but maybe that's a guy that the Astros get and they kind of bite the bullet and say, all right, one of you guys played left field because we need the bat big enough
Or
or
Jordan,
something like that.
yeah.
I mean, Jordan's had his own issues with the knee, but I mean, if you're putting him in the left field with the Crawford boxes right there, I mean, they're going to make up for it on the on the offensive side of the ball, maybe. But
Yeah, Cruz isn't gonna play in the field. So if you add Cruz and put him in the outfield, but yeah, that
um,
that could be an option for them for
yeah,
sure.
so that was a couple options from the Twins. The Diamondbacks are another team. You got Asdrubal Cabrera, Eduardo Escobar, who's having a really good season. David Peralta is a guy who has been, a Diamondback forever. That they might, I believe he's in his contract year, so they might trade him. A name I don't really see him dealing, but there's been rumors that he might be is Ketel Marte. Just hard thinking that they have him like under control for like 4 more years or something, 4.5 years. But he's really good. I mean, maybe a team like the Yankees, because he can play center field, they'll have him. Maybe they give up some big prospects for him or something.
Yeah, yeah. With that deal, looking at obviously we were talking before, and you didn't think they'd trade Marte, and I thought it might be a good idea. I feel like the Diamondbacks are a team that is several years away from contention again. They had a little run there where they were pretty good, but they really don't have any, future star talent at the close to the major league level right now, or really enough. And I don't think their money situation is going to be in the position to where they could just add a ton of guys through free agency, like maybe the Padres have done the last few years. So I think they're a team that really is going deep into a rebuild, and sometimes parting ways with a guy like Marte, who's got all this team control for cheap, can be a good thing because I mean he's going to be a guy that has so much trade value because of that, and you could get a fortune in prospects for him. So hopefully, it'll be interesting to see if they do pull the trigger on that move.
Absolutely. Well, same division. The Colorado Rockies are another team that they should be trading pieces off. Trevor Story being the big one. Um, they have a couple other guys. CJ Crohn's maybe somebody they could trade. Herman Marquez, John Gray, Michael Givens. I mean, they have a
Charlie
bunch of
Blackman too.
pieces. I I guess they could trade Blackman.
Yeah.
Um, Pieces that would be very valuable to teams on shorter deals and stuff. But the big one is Trevor Story, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, but I did see something interesting today that's saying that the Rockies might actually hold on to him because the past couple of years we've seen the value for rental players not being as great as what we think it was or what it used to be, and especially with the big shortstop market coming up, it might be even dampened a little bit more for that market, for Trevor Story, and that the qualifying offer and the higher draft pick might be more valuable to them because they can make their own pick of their own guy at whatever age, for him. So that'll be something interesting to watch out for, with the Rockies and Trevor Story. But another
Oh,
team too is the Detroit Tigers. They, we've talked a lot of the times that they needed just to find pieces that can be around for the long haul, and they have quite a bit of interesting people. Matthew Boyd, Michael Fulmer, Jonathan Scope. I mean, maybe Robbie Grossman's another name you mentioned, but those are really our four core sellers that we have on our mind right now.
yeah, and you look at those guys and the Rockies. I thought that's interesting on the Story thing. I hadn't heard that, and I don't know what I think of that. I don't. I feel like if you're the Rockies, regardless, Story's not going to re-sign there. I mean, unless they, I don't know why he would. At least, I mean, there's no way they're going to contend anytime soon.
No,
And
there's been rumors that he's wanted out.
yeah, so I'll be very surprised. I don't know why. I don't know why the Rockies, if he wants out, you can get a better player by trading him than you're going to get in the second or in the qualifying offer round of the draft. I mean, it's not like you're going to get the top guy, a top first rounder in the draft. You might get a decent top 30 prospect, in that qualifying offer round, or even or in the compensation round, or maybe like a top, probably top 15 in your organization prospect. So I feel like it'd be hard for the Rockies to, not get anything more than that for Story. I feel like you'd have to, but some of these other guys, I mean, I think Herman Marquez might even have the most value because he's got some control and he's a good pitcher, and people don't pay enough attention to the fact that he's good because for one thing, it's hard to pitch in Colorado. But he still put up good numbers. So I think that's a pitcher that could get out of Colorado, go somewhere, and really, really, succeed somewhere else. Um, but we'll see what happens with him. One other team that I kind of put on here that maybe doesn't have a ton of pieces to move, but the Royals, I don't really think they have a chance in their division. I know they're in third place, but they're 10 games out of first, 8 games out of second. They're not going to make the wild card. it would take an epic collapse from the White Sox or Indians, and they're also a team that's in rebuild mode. But we were sitting here trying to figure it out. We can't really think of too many pieces for them to trade because really most of their good production has come from young guys that they're not going to move. Guys like, Brady Singer, guy um, Adalberto Mondesi, a guy they're not going to trade. They're probably not going to trade out Salvador Perez ever. So, you look at that, and then we thought maybe Danny Duffy or Carlos Santana would be options. Apparently, they don't want to trade Benintendi, which, I mean, I probably would think about doing that, but I'm not the Royals. So
Right.
a lot of team that's one thing about the Royals. You really don't know what they're going to do because they do think much differently from other teams. They really do pull a kind of a classic, a throwback style
We're gonna stick
of
with our
organizational
guys.
management. Yeah, they really seem to they try to add every year before the season, add some pieces and hope that it works, hope that the pieces, pay off. So, but we'll see what happens with them. I mean, you could maybe see them deal a couple relievers or like a Mike Minor or something, but there's not going to be much for a lot of value from them. And like I say, we just don't expect to see them trade like a Whit Merrifield or something that might have a value. I mean, it's just unlikely to me at least. Um, but the big group of teams that we were going to talk about, this will probably be our more um, at this point in the trade season or in the pre-trade season. This would be our more kind of these teams. These are 5 teams that are on the borderline. We don't know what they're going to do. They could buy, they could sell, um, and I think the next 3 weeks, going into the All Star break, it's going to determine a lot of what they do. These are teams that are either in really good divisions but have good records that are several games back, but have maybe above 500, right at 500, or teams that are struggling below 500, don't have very good records, but are in divisions that are still winnable. So the first team we want to talk about here is the Mariners.
Yeah, the Seattle Mariners, they're not a team that I would really expect to try and buy because they're they're still in the middle of their rebuild. They've just had some really good success so far. Um, if they go on a really big hot streak this next couple weeks, they could. They're a team I more look to more the sell side. I mean, you got Kendall Graveman, you got a couple other relievers that have been really good. They could also deal like Mitch Haniger and Kyle Seager. Um, and those guys, I mean, those guys will have value to a bunch of teams because they're veterans. They're still really good. Seager's had a little bit of a down year, batting average wise and stuff, but still is hit for power. Um, but Seattle, they're on that fence, like you said, and they've really overachieved this year for what I really thought they were going to do. But I just don't think they're quite at that market. Even if they have a really good next couple weeks, that they're going to be a team that wants to go out there and sacrifice some of their prospect capital to kind of do a win now move.
Yeah, I do agree with that on the Mariners. I think that out of these 5 teams, I think they're the most likely one to sell, um, or maybe stand pat. Um, I think you could make an argument with the A's being the other team up there along with the Astros. You could maybe make an argument that if you can get something to within 4 or 5 games of the Astros, you could maybe buy a couple pieces, maybe something like the Marlins did last year, where maybe buy a maybe buy something that's not a huge buy, but don't trade maybe trade a lower end major league player or something where you have something you have depth. I wouldn't trade any of my top prospects or anything, but maybe add a back into the rotation starter and hope they have a really good second half or something like you were talking about earlier with Kyle Gibson, maybe something like that. If they win 4 or 5, if they win on a hot streak, won 5, 6 games in a row, you'd be sitting there looking at them at 44 and 36, and they'd be right square in the middle of both the wild card race um, and the division if they did something like that. So a team above 500, it's hard to see them selling, um, and it's hard to it's hard to see this team buying and being in their rebuild. And if they do sell, they could really get a lot of prospects, especially for Haniger, who's had a pretty good comeback year. Um, that would be a guy that could probably get a lot for. But the second team here, this might be the most interesting one out of all these, is the Angels because they're going to get one huge addition, sometime, and Mike Trout coming back. But they've somehow fought their way back up to 500 after falling pretty good bit below. And see, they're sitting here kind of thinking, dreaming, if we get Mike Trout back and we keep playing like we are right now, but with Mike Trout, we might be able to catch these teams up front. So it's what do you think the Angels might do?
Yeah, I think the Angels, even though they're lower than the Mariners in the division standings, albeit by a game, I think the Angels are a team more likely to buy. Like you said, they're going to get Mike Trout back. Shohei has been ridiculous. We'll talk about him a little bit more in a little bit. Rendon's kind of started to play better, or actually been able to play. He was missed a good chunk of the time. Um, Another guy that they might add. I mean, it's an in organization deal, but Joe Adele might get the call to come back up as well. So that could be another piece that they add, from inside the organization that they don't really have to trade anything for. And Joe Adele's one of their, he's their highest ranked prospect, but he's one of the top prospects in baseball as well. So that could, help them out. Really, with the Angels, it's all going to come down to what their pitching can do. Can they add maybe another bullpen arm to strengthen that? And can they add a starter that's going to actually be effective? They took the leap this year with Jose Quintana and Alex Cobb. They haven't been great. Dylan Bundy's really, fell back from what he
Yeah.
did last year. He's had like a 6 ERA this year. But with the Angels, really, they've been playing better. To me, they could add, but if their guys just play better, if they can get Bundy to be, half of what he has been, or a little bit better than what he has been so far, and get Cobb to Alex Cobb, he's actually had a decent season for Alex Cobb, but if you can get Quintana to be more what Quintana has been rather than what he's been this year, and get Mike Trout back, maybe get Joe Adele back, this team the team can still be really, really good.
Yeah, and I think with the Angels, I think this is, like I say, this is a team that is more likely to buy than the Mariners. But man, it's tough because the Astros are so far out there. They got to make up 8 games, and I feel like that with the Angels' talent level, and you look at the A's talent level, you can see the A's getting cold for a while, but I don't know if the Astros are going to get cold enough for the Angels to catch up 8 games unless the Angels are just scorching hot the second half of the season. So I think it's interesting. This is going to be an interesting one. And if the Angels do decide to sell, they've got some pieces they could sell: Quintana, Iglesias, Bundy, Cishek. They got a couple other relievers. I don't think they'd sell anybody that's locked up past this year, especially with the amount of money they have coming open with the Pujols contract expiring that they're still paying, although he's not on the Angels anymore. Um, I think that you look at a team that maybe they could trade away like an Upton, but pay his contract way down or something too. I still don't think you'd get much for him, but maybe you could get a team to take on a small amount because Upton has actually played pretty well this year, especially recently. But it'll be interesting to see what they do, and hopefully it'll be one of the more. I think the next 2 weeks really, really are a huge deal for the Angels. Maybe more so than any of the other teams here. But the next team we want to look at here is a team who last time we had a full season won the World Series, but they're old. So and they've struggled, and that's the Washington Nationals. And boy, do they have the list of people who they could sell if they wanted to.
Yeah, right at the top of that list, you have Max Scherzer, Cy Young Award winner, one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's at the end of his career. The hard part about trading Max Scherzer is he has 10-5 rights. So if you don't know what that means, it's a player who has 10 years of service time and 5 years with one team basically gets a full no trade clause. So they can say, yes, I want to go here. No, I don't want to go here. So Scherzer really has the power to, make a trade for wherever he wants to go. So that's going to be a hard part for the Nationals if they do decide to sell, working around that, because there's going to be a plenty of teams that want Max Scherzer. He's still really, really good and really, really effective. They can sell off Brad Hand. They could sell off Daniel Hudson, two really good relievers in the career. Hudson closed out that World Series win for the Nationals in 2019. Brad Hand, we talked about him, in the offseason. He's still really good. I think he's had a little rough stretch to start the year, but a lefty reliever is always going to be somebody who's coveted, at the trade deadline, especially one who has prior history of being really good. Jan Gomes is another guy they could sell off. Veteran catcher. Teams are always looking for veteran backup catchers coming down the stretch. Starlin Castro is another guy who can play, second. He plays some short, plays third, and can just kind of be that bench bat utility guy. They have a ton of pieces, and to me, I don't think that they're going to be in a position to try and make one last run at it. They'd be better off trying to retool and just say, okay, Trey Turner, Juan Soto, Steven Strasburg, let's just regroup next year and try again then.
Yeah, I think this is a situation where you're looking at a team that's a pretty clear number 4 in their division. So although they're really not that far back, they're only 5 games behind the Mets right now, who the Mets are losing in the ninth inning, so they could come to, 4 games back if that score holds. But it's hard to say because you're close, but obviously you've got 3 teams in front of you that are at least talent wise supposed to be really good in the Mets, Braves, and Phillies. So it's going to be really tough to overtake all those teams. So even though you're close, you're still behind those other 3 teams, or at least behind or tied with it. I think they're tied with the Braves, but I think Scherzer, being the competitor he is, I think that he would like to be traded to a, if the Nationals are out of contention, I think he would like to play for a contender. It's late in his career. I think he would probably waive his no trade, to go to a contender. You look at some of these other guys. Schwarber's a guy who's had a couple really good hot streaks lately. That teams might really his value might be up right now compared to what it could be at other times in the season. I do think Schwarber has an option for next year, so he might be a guy that they bring back for next year. But he could also trade him and then have somewhere else he get an option and get that option picked up and look good there. So you got and those other guys like Castro. Gomes is a guy who could probably be a good platoon option at catcher. Castro, like you said, utility infielder. I don't really think they have too many other great moves. Josh Harrison's a guy who's played all right this year at times. Um, but we'll see what happens with them. I think they're a team that needs to win some games here soon to get into that level of maybe buying. But I'd really, they've got a lot of holes. They've got probably 4 elite players and then nothing else. And that's kind of the thing. That's the problem with the Nationals. Um, but when you look at the next team on the list, is a team that it's kind of similar situation to the Nationals. They're number 4 in the division right now, or tied for third. And they're a few games back. But there's also 3 teams that are probably as good or better than them in the division, and that's the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah, and the Reds they're on that borderline, like you said, but the pieces are more unclear with the Reds of what they would actually be able to trade. Um, Nick Castellanos is a guy that you would think of just jumps right off the page because he has a player option for the end of this year. But the problem with that one is the CBA talks are coming up this year, and the offseason is going to be really, really uncertain. And Nick Castellanos, if he does pick up that option, he has 2 more years. So as the Reds, there's no guarantee that he will pick up that option. So a team is going to basically be trading for, half a year rental of Nick Castellanos when they might actually get him for 3 years. When the Reds are probably going to want to say, look, he has 3 years on this, but the way he's playing, there's a very real possibility that he doesn't pick that up because he's only owed $16 million a year. He might be able to get out there and get a bigger deal, but also with the offseason going to be, the CBA talks and that he might be hesitant and to pick that up. You
Yeah,
got a guy. Oh, good.
I was gonna say with him, you have a guy who I think you're gonna get a payment for him as if he's a rental, because you're either gonna get a guy who's gonna be gone at the end of the year, or a guy who plays like crap the rest of the year and you're stuck with his contract for 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a similar situation to the Nolan Arenado situation where he had that player option. You have a guy who he's either going to be really good this year and opt out, or you're stuck with an enormous contract for 7 or 8 years. that maybe is an overpay for him if he isn't playing well. So it would be a fairly risky move for someone to give up a lot for him. But for the Reds to keep him, I mean, if he has a bad second half, you don't make the postseason, then you're stuck with his contract. So you could see both scenarios here with him. A couple other guys, Doolittle hasn't been very good this year, but he's a guy that could definitely get moved. Wade Miley's been good this year; he could get moved. I said maybe a Sonny Gray is a guy who the Reds could move. He's been good this year as usual. He's battled injuries, but he's a really solid player. Really good pitcher. Got a couple years left on his deal, but um, it's one of those things where it feels like for the Reds, you got to do something. You don't want to get stuck in purgatory. And Suarez is another guy too that I just kind of put down that a surprise. Some kind of surprise. One of those guys that has some control. They did it with Bauer. Not with Bauer. Well, maybe it was they
It was
traded
Bauer.
away. Yeah, they bought Bauer, who had control, but
Mm-hmm.
and that's something else you could see. You could see the Reds if they're still around 500, just 3 or 4 games out. You could see them buy a player that's got a year and a half left or something, where kind of like they did with Bauer, but um, what the Indians did with Bauer, really. I mean, but I think it's gonna be very interesting to see what the Reds do. Like I say, I think they're a team that I think they probably are going to hover around 500 and be in that 4 to 5 games back when we get to the trade deadline. I don't think any team's going to really jump away in this division anytime soon. It's kind of a jumbled mess there. So I'd be surprised if I wouldn't be surprised if you see them. I wouldn't be surprised if you see them go either way. But the final team on our list, and it pains me to be in the situation to say this right now, is the Braves. They have had a tumultuous season. I mean, they've had just a little bit of everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, but they are still sitting there at 34 and 37. They're beating the Mets right now, so that if they win tonight, they'll be 4 games out of first place. Um, and you know this is a team that obviously with the pedigree that they have and the fact that they've been division champions the last 3 years. They went to the NLCS and to game 7 last year. You would think they'd be a more likely team to buy because of that. But they are sitting at 34 and 37. So if they have 5 of their next 9 games, I believe it was, are against the Mets. So if they lose 4 out of those 5 or something, then you could see them being 8-9 games back by the time we get to the trade deadline. And in which case, I think it would be dumb to not sell. So, if they do sell, they've got guys. They got Charlie Morton, who has pitched very, very, very well lately. Um, but he's also pitched. He's pitched pretty decently all year, but lately he's been on fire. A couple other starters like Drew Smiley, who you maybe could get something, out of him. You know, Team might take a chance on him. He's had some good outings. He almost threw a no hitter in the 7 inning game on Sunday Night Baseball. A couple other guys like Guillermo Heredia or Abraham Almonte, who have had good years so far, could be a bench player for somebody if they went that way. And you hate to say it, but they have the reigning MVP that's deal expires at the end of the year. So if you sell, you know, I don't think they would move Freeman because they're going to try to re-sign him. But you never know. I mean, if you don't think he's going to re-sign, then you could move him to a contender and get a haul for him, even though he's a rental, because he's one of the best players in baseball. So, um, I don't think that's going to happen, but you just never know. So, I do think the Braves probably end up in position to where they buy or at least stand pat at the deadline. They could definitely be one of the teams that just buys some good bullpen arms and to to deepen their bullpen and rides with what they got elsewhere. So they don't spend a ton, but they have some improvements to the biggest weakness of their team. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. They've lost a lot of one-run games this year, so I don't think it'll take too much for them to go on a hot streak at some point.
Yeah, while they're at it, if they do sell, they should just turn around and sell Ronald Acuna Jr. too.
That is the dumbest thing I think I've ever said on this show. So,
I just had to get a rise out of you.
yeah.
But no, yeah, I have a hard time thinking that the Braves are going to sell, especially, I mean, you looked at this team, last year went to the NLCS, pushed the Dodgers right to the brink of it. They're they've just had some really bad luck with that bullpen this year, dealing with some injuries, dealing with losing one of your better hitters in Marcell Ozuna to his issues. Freeman not playing up to the Freeman level to start with. Darno has been out for a long time. Albies underperformed to start the season. He's really came back now.
Yeah,
Dealing
he's
with Pache being out. I mean, Austin Riley's looked really good. Max Fried's dealt with injuries though. I mean, it's just a team that's dealt with a lot of injuries, and if they get healthy, we know that they're a team that can easily make a run to the World Series. And if they can, they might be a team to look at buying one of the bigger bats on the market at the deadline, and playing it out there and then figuring out what's going to happen with the Ozuna scenario, because it doesn't look like he'll be playing again this season at least.
yeah.
So they could get that bat to kind of fill into the outfield, but you also have the luxury of, hey, maybe you don't find that outfield bat, but you can trade for, I don't know, maybe Eugenio Suarez and put him at third base and put Riley to the outfield, or you make the move for Jose Ramirez, which has been talked about a lot. But who knows because of the contract scenario. So the Braves are just, even if they're so far back, I just have a hard time thinking that this is a team that's going to sell off, because they could make a run at any time. They're that good. And especially with the Giants, we still expect them to come back to the pack some. Even if you don't jump up to this to the win the division against the Mets, they're still a team that could make a run for a wild card spot.
Yeah, like I say, I think that is the more likely scenario is that they buy, but you know, if they did lose several games here in the next couple weeks, you could see this as being a team that sells. But buying wise, I think the first thing you got to do is, and this might be one of those teams we talked about earlier. Maybe the Braves and the Reds are another one that maybe with their position in the division, maybe you buy early. Go buy a couple of relievers. The Braves need relievers in the worst way. Their bullpen has been atrocious this year. So you go pick up a couple right-handed relievers, early, and see if that can kickstart a little bit of a 2, 3, 4 week or 2 or 3 week run where you win, win 60-70% of your games, and you get to a position where, okay, now we're at the deadline and we're tied for the division lead, and now we're going to go buy something big. I think that's a scenario that you could see from both the Braves and the Reds here, as they're definitely within striking distance of just going on a little hot streak. It's going to put you in position to maybe get a maybe to get in that position of it's time to buy. So interesting stuff. I definitely think that it's going to be for those five teams, maybe a couple more, maybe a team like the Phillies, or I mean, there's a few other teams that are kind of on that borderline of, are they going to buy, stand pat, sell? That if they go really hot or really cold over the next couple weeks, it could flip the other way. But I think it's very interesting to see what with these five, what happens over the next 2 weeks. We'll be watching them very closely. But
Absolutely.
but our last thing today, that we're gonna do is, as we always do, it's gonna be our players of the week. So I'll let you start off today, Damien. And who is your pitcher this week?
My pitcher for this week is Luis Castillo from the Cincinnati Reds. Um, he's really struggled this season in general. I mean, he's got a 5.61 ERA, a 4.20 FIP on the season, but he had a really good week. 13 innings pitched, 9 hits, 2 earned runs, 14 strikeouts. The walks were still there. 6 walks in 13 innings is not great, but a 1.38 ERA this week, a 2.40 FIP, a 3.21 xFIP, a half a wins above replacement this week. It's really good to see Luis Castillo kind of have maybe a bounce back week. Maybe this is the jump start to him turning around his season, because he has been really bad, but he's a very, very good, number two, maybe number three pitcher when he's on, and he just hasn't shown that this week or this year so far.
Yeah, and it's been an unfortunate season for him. I haven't watched him too many times. I think he's actually going to pitch against Atlanta this weekend, so I'll probably get a chance to see him then. But from what I understand, his changeup has not been near as good as it has been in the past, which, that's been one of the best pitches in baseball, the Luis Castillo's change up in the past. And it's just been, he's been really struggling with it this year so far, is what the report is.
Yeah, he's not getting he pitched against the Dodgers earlier in the year. He's not getting the swings and the miss on that changeup. It's that's been his main thing is it pairs it with that fastball so it looks like
Yeah.
a strike and you get the swings and misses, and he just really hasn't been getting that, and people
Yeah.
have been, those have been balls, and then he gets frustrated and tries to overthrow the fastball, and then he gets rocked with that, or he loses
Yeah.
command of it.
Yeah, no doubt. But my pitcher of the week this week, I'm actually gonna go. As we talked about, I usually go on a 2 start guy, but this week I decided to go on a 1 start guy. And the guy that I'm gonna go with is Pablo Lopez. Honestly, I had a hard time picking between Pablo Lopez and his teammate Sandy Alcantara, because they both had really good outings this week, and I didn't especially love any of the 2 start guys this week, but Pablo Lopez pitched 7 shutout innings the other day. I believe it's against the Cubs, who are a great offensive team. 9 strikeouts, no walks. Um, he's a guy who just I think you feel like he's very underappreciated. I think I feel like he's a really good pitcher. He's done a good job for the Marlins. This year yet again a 2.86 ERA and a 3.27 FIP. 9 strikeouts per nine, 2 walks per nine. He's just going right along as a very, very good pitcher. He pitches like probably a high end number 2 is what is at this stage. And you pair him with the other guys that the Marlins have. They have a dangerous rotation. So Pablo Lopez, I wanted to give him a little bit of love. He's having another tremendous year and had a great start this week.
Yeah, Pablo Lopez he's been one of the guys who I've kind of watched under the radar for the last couple of years, and like you said, he's been really, really good. And when Alcantara, is on his game, you mentioned that you wanted to pick him almost. He had an 8 1/3 shutout against the Pirates. Very fantastic start. And when they get Sixto back, that top 3 can go with basically any top 3
I
in
mean,
the.
you got Trevor Rogers too.
Oh yeah, I mean even
Yeah,
Rogers. I mean that could be a
you
top
got
4.
4. I mean, you got 4 really good
Yeah,
options
I
there.
keep forgetting about Trevor Rogers, but he has like what, a 1.8 something
187
ERA.
ERA right now.
That's
And a
ridiculous.
250 FIP. So it's not like, I mean, obviously he hasn't pitched like a 187 ERA pitcher so far, but
Right.
I mean, he's got a 250 FIP, which means he's still pitched like an elite pitcher. So
Yeah.
it's
Really
good
good
stuff for
year as
them.
well. Well, let's just transition to our hitters of the week. And who do you got for your hitter of the week?
Well, my hitter's also a pitcher, but I'm focusing on the hitterness of him today, and that's Shohei Ohtani, of course. He has been on a tear the last 7 days, hitting home runs. He has hit 6 of them this week. Um, he's hit 318 with a 423 on base, so he's walked a lot too, which is good for him. And 1.136 slugging percentage. That's a 296 WRC plus. The thing that I find the craziest about this is he's a 111 BABIP, which is
Yeah.
like completely unsustainably bad. But so he really should have had a better week than he's had, based on, he's just had some bad luck too. But he's still been insane. Um, hitting the ball, just, you know, on the season as a hitter, he's got 2.7. Um, he's got a 2.7 WAR, and that was before tonight, in which he's 0 for 1 with a walk so far. So, very good stuff for him. You look at his pitching wise. He's like we talked about. He walks too many guys. He still does, but he's also still pitched well. To a 2.70 ERA, but a mid threes FIP, which is still pretty good. His walks have actually come down a good bit compared to where they were at the start of the year. But he also had a good start this week pitching. I believe he pitched maybe 5 shutout innings or something. So
I think it was like 6 1/3
six
actually.
six and a third, yeah. So he's a guy who, and he's figuring it out on the command on the mound too. So if he's a guy, if he can stay healthy, um, man, he's so fun to watch. He's
Yeah.
entertaining. He's a great player. And you love to see him succeed at the level he succeeded at. It's fantastic for the game to have a guy you know as remarkable as Shohei Ohtani in what he does. He's a guy that you wake up and you haven't seen anything like him in over 100 years. So
Yeah, and some of the home runs he's hitting is just ridiculous. I
Oh
think he
yeah.
hit one at like an 18-degree launch angle the other day, which is just insane. But speaking of Shohei Ohtani and hitting home runs, this week Shohei Ohtani announced that he will be participating in the home run derby during All-Star weekend. So that's going to be something really fun to watch, to see Shohei Ohtani hitting absolute nukes in Coors Field.
Yeah.
Like, that's
So
going to be really fun to watch.
that'll be great. I'm excited for Shohei to see what he can do. But
Yeah.
who was your hitter this week?
I went with somebody really under the radar name that we haven't really hit on outside of probably when he was traded last year, but that's Ty France of the Seattle Mariners. This week he had a 500 average, a 542 on base, a 1.100 slugging percentage for a 324 WRC plus. 8.3 walk percentage this week, 12 and a half strikeout percentage. He had six RBIs, 6 runs scored, 3 homers. Just one of those under the radar type pieces that he plays all over the field for the Mariners. And, the Mariners don't get a lot of publicity because of how bad they have been for the past couple years. But Ty France, a pretty solid player, and he had a really good week for them. So somebody I wanted to kind of highlight and give the Mariners something to talk about.
Yeah, I like what Ty France has done. He's been one of those pieces we've talked about the Mariners having some young pieces step up and make them a little bit of a surprise. He's been one of them. 1.7 wins above replacement on the season. For a guy who, you weren't expecting that from. You were expecting him hopefully to take a step, but he's been really good. So.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, guess that'll wrap up the show this week. So we are very excited to see what happens with these buyers and sellers and teams that you know definitely excited to watch the teams that need to work, that we need to see some improvement from, or some that could go either way. It's a big few weeks for several teams out there right now, and it'll be very entertaining to watch them, and also very excited to see Wander Franco with more than just one game under his belt, because I think he might be one of those guys who just immediately jumps in as a superstar. So we'll keep an eye on that for sure.
Yeah, he's going to probably be somebody that's going to be our players of the week within the next couple weeks. I have a feeling of some
Well,
sort, but
he started off pretty good to be it next week. So
exactly. But like you said, this is kind of the kickoff to the hot stove season. You're going to hear us talk a lot about trades, trade deadline moves. This is when injuries are going to be even more of a deal, because people who are getting injured, teams are going to want to make a move to help fill that position. They're going to start looking at that and kind of setting themselves up for who's going to be the playoff run, who's going to reset, come back in the off season. So this is just kind of the start, the beginning of a lot of trade talk over the next month on this podcast. So get ready for that.
Oh yeah.
So that'll wrap up today's show. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this episode of the Bat Flip Podcast, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks everybody.